Emily slowly opened her eyes, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. Her body felt slightly heavier than usual, and a faint discomfort tugged at her lower abdomen. She gently pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the subtle movements of her baby. Despite the excitement and anticipation that had always filled her heart during pregnancy, a wave of unease crept over her this morning. Something felt off, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She shifted slightly on the bed, trying to find a comfortable position, but the mild ache persisted. Taking a deep breath, she tried to shake off the worry, telling herself it was probably just a normal pregnancy twinge. Ryan, sprawled beside her, glanced up lazily as she sighed. "It's just the baby, you'll be fine," he said with a casual shrug, barely lifting his eyes from the phone he was scrolling through. His tone was indifferent, almost dismissive, and it made Emily's stomach twist, not from discomfort, but from the sting of being ignored. She wanted to protest, to insist that she didn't feel fine, but every time she opened her mouth, Ryan's attention flickered elsewhere, his thumb tapping rapidly on the screen. She noticed the way he smiled briefly at a message, a small, secretive curve of his lips that made her heart sink. He glanced away whenever her eyes met his, as if avoiding her concern. There was a subtle tension lingering in the air, something unspoken, a hidden truth that Emily couldn't quite grasp yet. The contrast between her anxiety and his careless, distracted attitude weighed heavily on her chest. She wrapped a hand around her growing belly, trying to steady herself. Her unease deepened as she realized that, even in this intimate moment, Ryan's mind was elsewhere, leaving her to face the discomfort alone, not yet knowing that this morning would mark the start of a much larger storm. The night before, Ryan had slipped away without a word, leaving Emily to rest in the quiet of their home. What she didn't know was that he had spent the evening in the glittering lights of an exclusive lounge, sipping champagne and laughing with Vanessa Blake. Vanessa was everything Ryan found thrilling, glamorous, confident, and dangerously manipulative. She thrived on secrecy, the thrill of knowing she held power over him without anyone else being the wiser. Every gesture, every whispered word between them had been carefully orchestrated, a performance that made Ryan feel alive in ways he didn't feel at home with Emily. As Vanessa's laughter rang through the air, Ryan felt a rush of excitement. He checked his phone constantly, making sure Emily's texts were answered, his replies brief and calculated to keep her calm. "Just resting, love. Everything's fine," he typed, knowing full well he was lying. His messages were soothing, carefully crafted to maintain the illusion of a caring husband, while his mind was entirely elsewhere, dancing between the allure of Vanessa and the comfort of his lies. Every smile Vanessa threw his way, every playful touch, reminded Ryan of the selfish freedom he craved. At home, Emily's needs, her growing anxiety, and the tiny life she carried inside her were distant, almost irrelevant in his mind. The detachment from her was subtle but growing, like a widening gap he had chosen to ignore until it became impossible to bridge. The night's events foreshadowed the morning to come, the betrayal, the negligence, the selfish prioritization of pleasure over responsibility. Ryan thought of Emily only in terms of what she expected from him, not what she truly needed. The sparkling lights of the party masked the darkness of his choices, but the morning would shine a harsh truth, and Emily would soon feel the first sting of a husband more concerned with desire than duty. As the morning wore on, Emily's discomfort grew sharper, a persistent cramp that seemed to grip her abdomen with increasing intensity. She shifted on the edge of the bed, wincing as a wave of fatigue swept over her. A faint trace of blood on her hand made her heart skip, panic fluttering in her chest. She pressed a hand to her belly, trying to calm herself, willing the baby to be safe despite the unease that churned inside her. Each movement was exhausting, and a sense of vulnerability weighed heavily on her. Emily picked up her phone and dialed Ryan, her voice trembling slightly. "Ryan. I don't feel right." "Something's wrong," she said. There was a pause on the other end before he finally responded, his tone casual, almost irritated. "Emily, it's fine. It's just the baby. Stop worrying so much." He hung up before she could press further, leaving her staring at the phone in disbelief. The dismissal was a punch to her chest, the coldness of his words magnifying her fear. Feeling isolated and desperate, Emily reached out to her closest friends and a family member. Messages were sent, calls placed, but her growing worry made each second feel like an eternity. No one could arrive immediately, and the silence around her seemed heavier with each passing minute. Her thoughts raced, fear for her baby, frustration at being ignored, and confusion over Ryan's behavior. Why was he so careless? How could he dismiss her pain so easily? The questions swirled in her mind, each one amplifying the sense of impending crisis. Emily's intuition screamed that something was wrong, that she couldn't rely on Ryan for help. The tension built around her, a quiet storm growing louder in her chest, foreshadowing the moment when her world would be forced into chaos, and her vulnerability would collide with the harsh reality of her husband's selfishness. Ryan stood at the doorway, adjusting his jacket with a casual air, as if nothing in the world mattered beyond his next meeting. "I have some errands to run," he said with a half-smile, not meeting Emily's eyes. His tone was light, almost cheerful, but to Emily it felt like a dagger twisting in her chest. She tried to voice her lingering discomfort, the ache in her belly, the fatigue that made every step feel heavy, but Ryan waved her concerns away with a dismissive hand. "I'll be back soon. Don't worry so much," he added, already glancing at his phone as if a more interesting world awaited him elsewhere. As he walked out the door, Emily's heart sank. The protective presence she had hoped for, the reassurance that he would care for her and the baby, was nowhere to be found. She watched him disappear down the street, feeling the cold weight of abandonment settle over her. Meanwhile, Ryan was heading not to mundane errands, but to a private breakfast with Vanessa, where laughter and flirtation awaited him, the contrast between the two worlds stark and cruel. Emily sank back onto the bed, clutching her belly, her mind racing with helplessness. The betrayal was almost physical, a tangible weight pressing down on her chest. While she struggled with pain and fear, Ryan pursued pleasure, oblivious to her suffering. The unfairness of it stung sharply, creating a tension that wrapped around her like a vice. Each second he was gone magnified her vulnerability, foreshadowing the challenges she would soon have to face alone, with no one but herself to rely on. By mid-morning, Emily's discomfort had escalated into something far more alarming. The mild cramps she had felt earlier had intensified, and now she felt an unmistakable heaviness and pressure in her abdomen. A small, alarming streak of blood appeared, and her heart began to race with panic. Weakness seeped into her limbs, making every movement painful and labored. She pressed a trembling hand to her belly, whispering words of reassurance to her unborn child, but the fear gnawed at her relentlessly. Frantically, Emily grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The line rang, each second stretching painfully long. She tried to articulate her symptoms, her voice tight with fear, but the words barely formed. The operators reassured her, but she felt trapped in the apartment, the minutes crawling like hours. She sent desperate texts to friends and family, hoping someone could arrive, even though she knew they were far away. Every unanswered call, every delayed response, only deepened her sense of isolation. Pain forced her to rise from the bed, and she began to move across the apartment, each step a struggle. Her legs felt like lead, her body protesting with every motion. The silence of the apartment was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. The weight of isolation pressed down on her chest, amplifying her fear. She stumbled, nearly collapsing several times, but the thought of the baby inside kept her moving, fueled her determination to survive. In her mind, a storm of emotions raged, anger at Ryan's negligence, fear of losing her child, frustration at her helplessness. Yet amidst the terror, a quiet strength emerged. She reminded herself that she had to endure, had to reach safety. The ticking clock seemed to echo her pulse, the silence around her emphasizing her vulnerability, but it also mirrored her resolve. Each painful step became an act of courage, a silent rebellion against the man who had abandoned her, and a testament to the resilience that motherhood demanded. Emily's struggle was far from over, but in her determination, a spark of hope glimmered through the dread. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in the sunlit corner of a chic cafe, her perfectly styled hair catching the morning light, a glass of champagne in hand. She leaned back with a satisfied smile, reveling in the control she held over Ryan. Every glance at her phone, every playful swipe, reminded her of the power she wielded, the knowledge that he was distracted, thinking of her, prioritizing her over the life waiting for him at home. Her morning was a celebration of her own influence, and she basked in it unapologetically. Vanessa's fingers danced across her phone screen, sending flirty, teasing messages to Ryan. "Can't wait to see you later. Miss you already." Each notification she sent was a deliberate assertion of dominance, a reminder that she occupied the center of Ryan's attention. Her confidence was intoxicating, and she thrived on the thrill of secrecy, knowing that Emily was unaware of the betrayal unfolding just miles away. Ryan, seated across from her, felt a mix of excitement and unease. His mind tugged in two directions: the undeniable pleasure Vanessa offered and the nagging responsibility toward Emily and their unborn child. He tried to maintain composure, but his eyes flicked nervously toward his phone, guilt brushing against desire. The tension was palpable, an unspoken acknowledgement of the consequences that could follow if his duplicity were exposed. Vanessa's laughter, bright and careless, contrasted sharply with Emily's struggle at home. The arrogance and manipulation of the mistress underscored the imbalance in their lives, foreshadowing the reckoning that awaited Ryan. Emily's pain and vulnerability loomed in the background of this deceitful morning, a silent shadow of the consequences yet to arrive. Ryan's phone buzzed sharply against the polished surface of the cafe table, cutting through the comfortable hum of conversation. He glanced at the screen and froze. The name blinking in bright letters sent a jolt through his chest: Mr. Harrison. His heart skipped a beat as a wave of panic swept over him. He hesitated, caught between the thrill of the morning with Vanessa and the looming responsibility he had tried so desperately to ignore. "Everything okay?" Vanessa asked, tilting her head with a teasing smile, clearly noticing the sudden change in his expression. Ryan's fingers trembled as he swiped to answer. "Hello, Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice strained, trying to mask the anxiety threatening to surface. The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. There had been a major professional crisis overnight, and Ryan's immediate attention was required. Deadlines had been missed, critical decisions delayed, and his absence could cost the company millions. Every word from Mr. Harrison felt like a hammer striking Ryan's chest. The comfortable arrogance he had carried all morning vanished, replaced by a gnawing dread. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that in prioritizing Vanessa over Emily, he had also neglected his professional duties. Vanessa watched him closely, her smirk widening as Ryan's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "You look worried," she said, her voice dripping with amusement, enjoying the irony of the situation. She leaned back, swirling her glass, seemingly entertained by the unfolding drama. Her eyes sparkled with mischief as if daring him to admit he was losing control. Ryan's mind raced. Images of Emily struggling alone, the fear and pain she must be enduring, collided with the pressures of his professional obligations. Guilt gnawed at him, fear constricted his chest, and a bitter realization settled in: he had recklessly abandoned both his wife and his responsibilities, chasing a fleeting thrill. This was the first moment the weight of consequences truly hit him, a sobering awareness that his actions had set in motion a chain of events he could no longer ignore or undo. Emily gritted her teeth as another wave of pain coursed through her abdomen, forcing her to pause mid-step. Every movement felt like an uphill battle, her legs wobbled beneath her, and sweat dotted her forehead despite the cool morning air. Yet, with a fierce determination, she refused to give in. Clutching her belly with one hand and gripping the railing in the hallway with the other, she forced herself forward, step by painful step. The fear gnawed at her relentlessly, but it was matched by an equally strong determination: she had to reach the hospital, no matter how excruciating the journey. The journey through the apartment and down the narrow staircase felt endless. Emily's breaths came in short, shallow bursts, each one a reminder of her vulnerability. She kept her phone close, hoping someone would answer her frantic calls, but the silence echoed around her, amplifying the isolation. Yet with every faltering step, her courage strengthened. This was no longer just about herself, the tiny life inside her depended on her perseverance. The thought ignited a spark of resolve that refused to dim, even as her body trembled with exhaustion. Finally, she reached the hospital entrance, leaning heavily on the sliding doors. The security guard noticed her pale face and the blood staining her hands, immediately ushering her inside. Medical staff rushed to her side, their urgent voices cutting through the haze of pain and fear. Nurses guided her toward a wheelchair, but she insisted on walking a few more steps, determined to prove to herself that she could survive without relying on anyone. Her bravery shone through every strained movement, every trembling breath, capturing the attention and concern of everyone around her. As she settled on the hospital bed, a wave of realization washed over Emily. She didn't need Ryan to fight this battle for her. She had the strength, courage, and instinct to protect herself and her child. Fear still lingered, but it was now tempered with resolve. She whispered to her unborn baby, promising that they would both make it through this ordeal. In that moment, Emily discovered a profound inner strength she hadn't fully recognized before, marking the beginning of her emotional transformation. Ryan rushed into the hospital, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the polished floor, his face pale with a mixture of panic and guilt. He spotted Emily lying on a hospital bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but resolute. He opened his mouth to speak, fumbling for words. "Emily." But she cut him off before he could offer his weak excuses. "Don't," Emily said sharply, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched across her face. "Don't even try. I saw it, Ryan. I know everything." Her eyes, fierce and unwavering, bore into him, stripping away the facade he had so carefully maintained. "You left me here alone while I was bleeding. You dismissed my pain. And you," she paused, swallowing hard to steady herself, "you chose her over me. Over our child." Ryan's lips parted, but no words came out. He tried to explain, to justify himself, but Emily's piercing gaze held him in place. She continued, her voice rising with controlled anger, "Vanessa isn't just a distraction, is she? She's the reason you ignored me. She's the reason you thought your thrill was more important than my life, than our baby's life." Ryan looked away, shame creeping over his features. He had no defense. Every excuse he had rehearsed evaporated under Emily's unflinching truth. Even as he opened his mouth to say something, Emily's mind raced, recalling every flirty message, every secretive glance, every moment of betrayal. The nurses and a few bystanders watched the tense scene unfold as Emily asserted herself with clarity and authority. The confrontation was not just about the affair, it was about her refusing to be silenced, about demanding recognition for the pain and fear she had endured alone. Ryan felt the weight of moral reckoning pressing down on him, a social and personal humiliation he could not evade. Emily's strength radiated from her every word, every trembling yet controlled gesture. She no longer needed to plead or beg, her courage and integrity were evident to everyone present. In that charged moment, the scales of power shifted. Ryan, once the one in control, was left facing the undeniable truth of his selfishness and betrayal, while Emily stood tall, unbroken, asserting her strength and the unyielding protection of her own heart and her child. As Emily rested in her hospital bed, a clarity settled over her mind that had eluded her for weeks. The fear, the pain, and the betrayal she had endured transformed into a resolve she could no longer ignore. She refused to allow Ryan's selfishness to dictate the outcome of her life or the safety of her unborn child. Every ounce of fear was replaced by determination. She would reclaim her power and independence, no matter the obstacles. She picked up her phone and began contacting trusted family members, sharing every detail of Ryan's neglect and the betrayal that had left her isolated and in danger. Simultaneously, she reached out to legal support and authorities, ensuring that there would be accountability for his actions. The weight of her silence was lifted as she realized she had allies ready to stand by her, and the knowledge empowered her further. Meanwhile, Ryan's world began to unravel. The consequences of his negligence and betrayal rippled quickly. At work, Mr. Harrison confronted him about missed deadlines and critical errors, shaking the foundation of Ryan's professional reputation. Colleagues who had once admired him now viewed him with suspicion and disappointment, leaving him scrambling to maintain his position. Vanessa, too, began to feel the shift. Her influence over Ryan weakened as the truth came to light, and whispers of the affair and his abandonment of Emily circulated. The glamorous aura she once wielded so confidently began to crack, replaced by humiliation and exposure. Through it all, Emily remained steadfast. Her empowerment was not born from revenge but from the courage to assert her rights, protect her child, and reclaim her dignity. In that moment, she understood the true strength she possessed. She had survived neglect, betrayal, and fear, and she was emerging not only unbroken but triumphant, standing firmly in her power as a mother and as a woman who refused to be silenced or oppressed. Weeks passed, and Emily's focus shifted entirely to her pregnancy, her health, and the future she was determined to build for herself and her child. Each day, she nurtured her body and mind, attending checkups, resting when needed, and preparing her home for the baby's arrival. The fear and anxiety that had once dominated her mornings were gradually replaced with a sense of calm purpose. She allowed herself to dream of the life she wanted, a life built on independence, resilience, and love for her child. Ryan, on the other hand, faced the consequences of his actions on every front. At work, he struggled to regain trust from colleagues and superiors, his reputation tarnished by missed responsibilities and the scandal surrounding his personal choices. Social circles that had once admired him now whispered behind his back, and the veneer of power and control he had wielded over others was stripped away. He was left confronting the reality of his selfishness and the lives he had disrupted, realizing too late the magnitude of his negligence. Vanessa, too, could no longer hide in the shadows. Her influence over Ryan diminished as the affair and his betrayal became known, leaving her exposed to public scrutiny and humiliation. The glamorous image she had carefully cultivated cracked, revealing the emptiness behind her manipulation. Through it all, Emily moved forward with grace and strength. She embraced each day with hope, feeling the baby's movements as a constant reminder of her resilience. She prepared a nursery filled with love and warmth, envisioning the future she would share with her child, free from fear and betrayal. In the quiet moments, she reflected on the journey she had endured, realizing that she had emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakable. Emily had reclaimed her life, proving that even in the face of abandonment and deceit, courage and determination could triumph, creating a new beginning filled with hope, empowerment, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.